I'll call to order the March meeting of the Finance Committee. And let me preface by saying I think we may have a record number of items on the agenda today, so we have an awful lot, and you can tell by the fact that the room is full today. But anyway, we will do our best to get through as much as we can and go from there. We will start with the consent agenda. Give me just 1 second. Okay. Does anybody have anything they would like pulled? Mr. Montgomery.
C1 and C5.
C1 and C5. Ms. Adams?
C5.
C5. Ms. Burke?
None.
I had C5, also had C6 and C12. Would anyone else, Jeff, from all of y'all, want anything pulled? Okay.
Move approval of balance.
Was a motion, is there a second? Okay, there's a motion to second to approve the balance. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed likewise. That is passed. We will start with C1, please.
Consideration of items relating to the modification of the previously authorized exchange between the City of Winston-Salem and the County of Forsyth. Resolution authorizing modification of the previously authorized exchange between the City of Winston-Salem and the County of Forsyth, receipt of $966,545, and B, ordinance amending the project budget ordinance for the City of Winston-Salem, North Carolina for the fiscal year 2013-2014.
Okay. Mr. Montgomery, I think you had this one on the...
I do. I have a couple questions on this. First one I'll start off is, why did we wait in terms of the reimbursement? Why was that not done sooner? Or was this seen at that time as being something that was coming?
If you're referring to the money back to the county, they were working with us on an agreement for the usage of the land as well as the money, and so we were just holding the money in escrow, if you will, until that was resolved.
Okay. Then the next one is that, so this action would pretty much turn over both of these properties 100% into the hands of the county, correct?
In exchange for the money, that is correct.
Is there a MOU between the city and the county on the operations of the range?
For the firing range, the city has, yes.
I would like to see a copy of that. My only concern in that is in the sense of making sure that our continued use of that facility is assured moving forward in terms of the process and the role the city played in that facility, in particular, making sure that that is taken care of, move forward. Not totally excited about the thought. I would rather, particularly on the range, have seen us pay our part on that. The other portion of that, I could see us writing off. But on this one in particular with the range, that just kind of concerns me on that one in terms of full control and operations and ownership at the county level and no ownership at the city level.
Greg, why don't you comment on this a little more? I think this
just for clarification, the city had bought some land north of the city for a potential firing range, which we did not use, and that is the land that will be going to the county. The land that we actually built the firing range on is off of Liberty Street, and so the city actually owns that, and we have control over how it operates under an agreement with the county. So they're actually our tenant, if you will, in a landlord-tenant relationship, if you want to consider it that way. The two pieces of property that will be going to the county are the property we were going to use for the firing range we no longer need, as well as this parkland out near Reagan High School.
So, because that's not, that confused me totally. So, this one is not at where we actually construct the facility.
That is correct.
Mm-hmm. Why did we end up owing the county $966,000 on that?
They were responsible for paying part of the cost of the firing range that we built.
Yeah.
And the cost that they paid was significantly more than our actual construction cost. So we were holding the money in escrow until we resolved how we were going to use it and whether they wanted to get the half of the land for the original firing range location. And so that's why we've now resolved that and are ready to recommend to the committee that you use the county's money as money available for other city projects and sell them the residual half of the land we no longer need.
Okay, so basically when we built the firing range, it came in under budget, and therefore they enjoy some of the savings as we did.
That is correct.
And instead of giving them their cash back, we're going to give them some land we don't need anymore.
That is correct.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Burke.
since this is in the Northeast Ward, I'm going to ask the city manager, would you go back through the minutes when we were dealing with this for public safety, Mr. Turney, And I think all of the council people who may not have had the opportunity will then read what we did. We looked at it very carefully, and we looked at that area up there, Brookwood, because we're trying to motivate and stimulate some business in that park up there. But one thing that Councilman Montgomery brought to the attention, we want to make sure that everything that's in writing, that is clear and is understood, and that we have all rights to what we're supposed to have with that firing range.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Is there a motion to approve?
Move for approval. Second.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise? Okay, that passes. We'll now go to C5.
Consideration of items relating to the Children's Home Incorporated. A, resolution authorizing substitution of funds to the Children's Home Incorporated for My Aunt's House located in the North Ward in the amount of $300,000. And B, ordinance amending the project budget ordinance for the City of Winston-Salem, North Carolina for the fiscal year 2013-2014.
Mr. Brooks, before you get too comfortable in that new chair, why don't you give us a 2-minute, or whoever, I'm looking at you since your name's on here, just kind of explain this to us. It was fairly complicated in reading it.
Yes, it was.
Yes, council had approved finances of up to $325,000 to the children's home to renovate the Reynolds Cottage, and that rehabilitation was completed, and they are no longer using it for the purpose of the loan. And home funds were used, and per the home funds regulations, if you no longer use the property for the intended purpose, we have to pay the home funds back to the feds. So because it is no longer being used for that purpose, we are now required to repay the funds that we use back to HUD. There is an option that we can replace those funds with another fund source. And if we replace the home funds with another fund source, HUD will allow us, in essence, to reuse that 325 for other eligible home fund activities. So that's what we're requesting, to substitute the home funds with housing finance funds, repay HUD with housing finance funds, which would then give us the 325 to be used again for eligible home fund activities.
Okay, a number of people had questions. Mr. Montgomery, I'll start with you.
So the $300,000 that would then go to the children's home comes out of Housing Finance Assistance Fund. Then we're also going to take another $325,000 and pay back HUD out of the Housing Finance Assistance Fund. So that's a total of $625,000. Am I correct? That comes out of the fund?
No.
Well, that's what I heard.
Yes, we're going to pay
We got to pay that.
HUD back. So they have to get that 300. Then we're going to substitute, yes, 300,000 for the children's home. Yes. In order to get the use of the 300,000 home funds. Otherwise, we would just be paying back the 300,000 and not having use of any additional monies, which would be that 325. You're correct.
But I'm saying, but both those funds will come out of Housing Finance Assistance, and the home funds have restrictions that the Housing Finance Assistance funds don't have
You're
restricted.
correct.
So those would be funds that would be in the same pool, but we restricted unlike the rest.
Correct.
Okay. And with that $300,000 to the children's home, is that an ongoing amount that's going to be looked to be done again in future years, or is this a one-time?
It's a one-time, and the loan terms would be the same as the original loan terms were for the initial home loan that was made.
Okay.
Let me ask a question. When it's all said and done, we collectively, I'm talking about all the funds combined, have the same amount of money in the bank as we do now?
Yes.
Yeah, this is a bookkeeping entry, in essence.
Well,
You can't.
No,
It's restricted.
no.
But we're not going to be out any more money.
Well, I mean, we'll have 300,000.
300,000,
We'll be out
Which we got to
300
pay anyway.
which we got to pay anyway.
We got to pay that anyway.
But we'll have the $300,000 available from home funds for other home-eligible projects. So, because HUD
So
will
the
give...
bottom line is we gave
We-
300,000 to, wait, we gave 300,000 to the children's home.
Mm-hmm.
And now we got to give 300,000 back to HUD. So that's a
Correct.
total of 6.
Correct.
Okay. No matter what we do, we got
No
to.
matter what we do. So we're either out of 300,000 or we get the use of 300,000.
Is the children's home still obligated to pay us back?
Yes.
Whether or not we get it's a different story, but they're obligated.
Correct.
Okay, all right. Miss Burke was next. She had her hand up.
You want, it's your ward, you want to say something? Go ahead. Okay. How can we avoid this type of way you're doing business? What could we have done? Because actually, when we first started speaking, it was if there was going to be one 300,000, then we know it's going to be two $300,000. Was there anything that could have been put in that loan to the children's home? What kind of guidelines do we give them to say how this would be done?
Well, they are responsible for paying the money back, and I think in this particular instance, anytime we're making a loan with home funds or other federal funds where you have payback restrictions, you are subject to have this occur. This is probably my first time encountering where you have an option to pay the money back and then get the reuse of the 300,000. Normally, you're just paying back and not getting anything in return. So it's I guess, to more specifically respond to your question, I think there would be some risk involved with all of these loans that you make where you have some restrictions as to whether or not the loan terms are complied with completely or not.
When you say we have the reuse, that's the reuse of the funds if the children's home pays us back, or?
No, that's the reuse of the home 300,000 home funds.
We'll have those.
Doesn't matter whether they pay us back or not.
Okay.
So
So,
they'll be paying back on the housing finance loan, and we still have use of the 300,000 home funds.
okay. Ms. Adams, did you have a question or comment?
Yes, I guess my question is to Councilmember Burke, which I have voiced this to a couple of the council members. Ultimately, the Methodist home or somebody is responsible for this loan, is that not correct?
That's correct.
Have we made any contact with them to try to secure the money or the funds, or how they expect to satisfy this commitment?
They have another activity, I think we mentioned in here, that they intend to use as a replacement, and we do have a representative from the children's home here who could respond to any of those specifics as to what that is and what their intentions are.
Could they
Could they
come
comment?
forward?
Who's here?
Yep.
If you give your name and address for the record, please, so we'll-
Maurice Ware, 821 Boyer Drive, Clemens, North Carolina.
Thank you, sir.
Or should I say 1001 Reynolda Road?
Whatever
Children's
you
home.
want. Thank you, Mr. Ware. If you could just comment briefly on what your future uses are for this facility.
Yes, currently we are going to move our Restart Substance Abuse Program into Reynolds Cottage. Restart Substance Abuse Program is a program geared toward adolescents who are struggling with substance abuse issues. We have 9 beds currently available, and it is one of our most stable programs. I don't think it's a secret that we've been going through some organizations since I've been there. And in looking at the loan and making sure that we don't have to come in front of you again, we put one of our most stable programs in there.
Okay.
So that was the thinking behind moving Restart into
Okay,
Reynolds Cottage.
thank you. The mayor had a comment.
Well, I had a comment. I didn't have a question of him.
Oh, question, okay.
I don't have a question of him.
Okay.
I've got a
May I
question.
Thank you very much.
Question.
Anyone have a question, Mr. Ware?
I have a
Yes,
question,
ma'am.
if that's okay. What happened to the program with the teen mothers?
That dated me, but as best as I can figure out is that the children's home at that point in time was in the middle of a CEO search. They were looking at shoring up their finances and made the decision to close the program because they applied for the second round of federal funding and they did not receive the second round of funding, which put them in a position to either carry the program and continue to lose money or try to shore up their finances. So that was, as best I can tell, what occurred.
I guess what I would like from you to just give me a little history on how many mothers you had over there. 10 mothers, not now. Just
Okay, I can get that information too. Yes, ma'am.
And then how long it was in existence? So I can.
Could you repeat
How
that?
long, pardon me, maybe I should talk through this.
Yeah.
How long was it in existence,
Okay.
the program? So I
I have
a
that
little
for you
history
first
on
thing in the morning. Yes, ma'am.
it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Now, does anyone else have any questions or comments? Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, I'm just trying to, Rich, I'm just trying to figure out the dollars here. So we made them a loan. We got to replace it with the Housing Finance Agency dollars. We're going to take the monies that was at the children's home and repay our home account, not repay the feds. We're going to pay our home account. Is that right?
We're going to, yes, we're repaying the home account and the feds. They're both the same.
The same thing. So those dollars will stay in the city of Winston-Salem's ledgers.
Correct,
So to get back to what the chairman was trying
Yeah.
to get at earlier, those dollars are still in our account.
correct.
So we're not out 600 and plus thousand. We just simply did a switch. Those home dollars are coming in, and certainly Councilman Montgomery is right. Those home accounts are restricted, a little bit more so than the housing finance, but those dollars are still in our ledger.
Yes, because you still have use of.
Still have this use of.
300,000.
Okay, thank you.
As I said earlier, it's a bookkeeping.
That's what I was trying to get at.
All right,
Correction.
Yeah.
The initial loan term was a deferred loan for 20 years. Councilmember Burke, you asked about repayments. So it's a deferred loan with 0% interest, so they aren't making any payments.
okay. Mr. Montgomery, you had Mr. McIntosh.
I'm looking for a definition of the phrase "have use of,"
Yeah.
and so we're talking about exchanging restricted money for unrestricted money. Basically,
Right.
what we're doing. Right. So have use of that money. We don't have. If we use it, we don't have an interest payment associated with it.
The money we'll have, the new 300, by exchanging it, we'll have 300,000 available of home funds. We don't have to pay the feds any interest, but we can only use that money for home eligible projects.
Okay. And so when we go use it, though, we're not paying
No.
an interest fee on that. Okay.
Mr. Montgomery, do you have anything else?
I did. Just going back to the money. And again, in terms of those home eligible things, in terms of if the program had not gone away, we would not have been required to repay the dollars, correct?
That's correct.
Right. So that would have been the 325, the 300 that we're paying, we would have been able to use for something else instead of repaying this down, correct?
The 300,000 housing finance fund.
Right.
Yes.
That we're going to use to pay back the home, we would have
Yes.
been able, that would have been free to be used for something else.
You're correct.
But now it's being encumbered by this because the program went away.
That's correct.
All right. So I think I'm half right if I'm not all the way right. And the reason I'm there is everybody around this table knows that, particularly when it comes to the majority use of what this fund is for in terms of some type of housing-related use. And we've used it for other things in the past, and so this is nothing different from there. But there are two other items on the agenda tonight that's going to add up to about $720,000, $21,000 that's going to come out of the Housing Finance Assistance Fund if we approve that. And so for me, there's even another item on here that could potentially benefit from us investing some dollars out of this account in terms of making some housing affordable in some parts of the city that there currently isn't. And so for me, it's always looking at what are we using this for, making sure we're going to have funds available to use for what I believe was the original intent. Or if not, that the funds are being used to assist individuals or some type of program that services a underserved part of our community. I think this program does that, but I just want to at least bring that up in the conversation of what we're looking at and the overall fund itself. So,
Okay. To conclude this, we are moving money between funds from a fund that is less restrictive to one that is more restrictive, and that's
Correct.
that's the rub. Okay, yes, ma'am.
Last comment. It lists here, it says, after you read the first paragraph, it talks about the loan is secured by a deed of trust on the 1-acre Reynolds Cottage parcel. It talks about the financing of a 20-year deferred loan, is that us? Do we own the deed? Is that the deed of trust to protect our money?
Yes.
And it says, though, if the property is sold or no longer used for the intended purpose. So is it not going to be used for the intended purpose? I mean, how does this go? Because this looks kind of...
Because this new activity, because we are switching the fund source, and it's less restrictive, the housing finance funds, you don't have that requirement. But we still have to use the home funds. If I understand your question, we still have to use the home funds, the $300,000, for what would be the eligible home activity.
And I guess, Mr. Brooks, well, I guess I'm taking this, maybe I didn't make myself clear. If there is a deferred, a deed of trust for the property, and it is not being used for what it was originally being used for when we signed off on this, and now it's going to be something else, can we still take the deed of trust? Because it says that, repayable if the property is not sold or no longer used for the intended purpose. Does that come back to us? I mean, is that ours?
Yes, we will still have a security interest, and that will be, the deed of trust will be transferred to the new housing finance funds.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Adams, I think it's raised a good point. Are they not in default?
Yes.
They are.
Yeah.
So we could call the loan?
Yes.
Yes, you could.
Yeah.
Okay. But we being real nice.
We being
Yeah.
nice.
Okay. Anything else to discuss here?
And I would let you know, there are state funds, $500,000 also in state funds involved in this, and the state has agreed to substitute their funds with another fund source.
Okay. All right. Mr. McIntosh.
What's our position on those loans? Are we,
Which should be second.
we're subordinate to the state?
We always are.
Okay.
That's life. Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am.
Remove. Anytime we have situations like this, I've always said for the record, when we have another case like this, I want us to be as fair and kind to any other cases
Absolutely.
that come before this council.
Absolutely.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise?
I'm just abstaining until.
And one abstention.
Yeah.
Okay. C6, which I asked to be pulled. Mr. Suggs, I see you sitting in the back. Just had a quick question. We keep extending this, or do you need more time than what you're asking for? I just want to be sure that please come up. Why don't you read this one, please? Everybody knows I'm getting carried away here.
Resolution approving a 20-month extension to the Downtown Development Agreement for proposed mixed-use development with Golar Community Development Corporation, located in the East Ward.
Okay.
Yes, we need more time on this. We're working with a developer now. We do have a memorandum of understanding with the group Laurel out of Charlotte, and we've met with the staff, and we think we are on the right road here.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any other questions, comments?
I just want
Yes,
to
ma'am.
make a comment. When I look at the project of Gola, and we look at the area, we made a tremendous improvement there. That is a plus for us as progress, and I guess you can understand that, Mayor. We go back. I think you're not only two around here, and some folks felt that it was not to take the chance, but we took the chance, and you have been steady. You've been on target, I'll say that, in what you're doing. And so when I ride down Patterson Avenue and I start looking there and come on down to Fifth Street, we can see our investments, and it looks very good.
Do I have a motion for approval?
Move for approval.
Second.
Okay. You have a question?
No, it's just a comment actually on this.
Comment, go ahead.
Just as Mr. Suggs says, I think they're on the right track. I've seen some of the things that they're working on. They have an opportunity, in my opinion, to bring a type of housing to downtown that, in my opinion, is currently missing. And so whatever support we can give to them, I hope we can do that fully.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise? I think the last one was C12. I actually meant for a different number, so I do not have a question on this one, so I will look for a motion to approve. C12.
Maybe you need to read it.
Read it, please, yeah.
Consideration of amendments to the fiscal year 2013-2014 budget ordinances. Ordinance amending the annual appropriation and tax levy ordinance for the city of Winston-Salem, North Carolina for the fiscal year 2013-2014, and ordinance amending the project budget ordinance for the city of Winston-Salem, North Carolina for the fiscal year 2013-2014.
A motion to approve?
Move for approval. Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise. Ms. Carmen, I actually had a question on 13. I'll call you privately on it. Okay, we will now move to the general agenda. And we have 4 items on the general agenda. If you'll read number 1, please.
Consideration of items related to the funding of Northwest Child Development Centers Incorporated. A, resolution authorizing funding to Northwest Child Development Centers Incorporated in the amount of $200,000. And B, ordinance amending the project budget ordinance for the city of Winston-Salem, North Carolina for the fiscal year 2013-2014.
Mr. Brooks?
Yes.
Why don't you comment on this one, to kind of get everybody up to speed?
Northwest Child Development Center operates child care centers, the most recent one being the Mud Pies that was recently opened at the corner of Patterson and Liberty, adjacent to the parcel that we just spoke about with Goble. They are requesting a $200,000 loan to continue operating. Mr. Burton has indicated that they need this loan because they lost funds during the government shutdown, and enrollment at the center has been less than what was projected because, as we have said, parents are having trouble paying the tuition due to job losses or other reductions that they are experiencing in employment. So he is requesting a $200,000 loan to get them through this shortfall. So if you approve this action, it would be $200,000, or staff would recommend $200,000 again from the Housing Finance Fund on a 5-year term. However, caveat with that would be that the funds are repaid just as soon as they receive repayment either on the monies that they lost or enrollment gets better. So both actually.
Okay.
Mr. Burton is here and to respond to any questions.
You might want to come up front. People probably have a few questions. Are there any questions or comments on this?
I'm going to ask Mr. Burke some questions.
Yeah, I do too. Well, whoever wants to start. Ms. Burke, you want to start?
He's in his ward. He wants
Okay, go ahead.
Just a couple questions, and then I have questions to staff. In regards to the actual numbers, in terms of what do you see as the hindrance in terms of, I know you said in terms of actual individual job loss and that kind of stuff, but are there any other things that you think that add to the low enrollment at the downtown?
Correct. There's a couple of things, actually. And again, my name is Tony Burton.
Give your name and address, please.
Tony Burton. The address for the facility is 251 East 7th Street. But there are several things that contributed to the low enrollment at this point that we've targeted. One of the major things was that we could not receive DSS funding or child subsidy children in a new facility until we received our star-rated license from the state. We just got that. Opening up the new facility, we did not know that. When we opened up the new facility, we thought we could automatically take in subsidy children. We could take them in, we just could not receive all of the subsidy payment. So that was a big issue for us.
And that's the vouchers?
That's the voucher system, correct. Now that we've received our 5 stars, which we just received a couple weeks ago, we can receive those children, we can receive that funding. The other part of that was during the government shutdown, we received funding through CACFP, which is a government program. That program was froze for a while. That has been unfroze, and we've started to receive that funding. The third component to that played a big part in that is the fact that all of our services through DSS are paid after the services are rendered. And so we have to provide the services, pay the staff, and do all of the things that are necessary, and then bill for that, and then collect for that, typically anywhere from 15 to 30 days after that date. With the low enrollment amount, our break-even numbers for that facility is about 110. We're currently at 65. We should have been at 110 no later than December. So these last 3 months, with not having those fundings and not being able to receive those children, has caused us to fall behind and get further behind. For us to continue to operate, we need those additional funds so that we can secure that, take care of those obligations that are there, and then move forward from that.
Okay, and the other question on that, so overall with your centers, do you have a number, and this is not, maybe you can get this at a later date, the number of children overall that you serve that receive some type of subsidy?
Yeah, I can get that number for you. I can guess now. I would probably say we're somewhere in the neighborhood about 40% of our children, but I couldn't put an exact number on that.
Okay.
Ms. Burke, I think you had some questions.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was going to ask a similar question. How many daycares you have, facilities?
In Forsyth County, we have 3 facilities. In Stokes, we have 1, and in Davie County, we have 1. We had 4 facilities here in Forsyth, and we closed the Coliseum location when we opened up the downtown east location.
And I was going to ask the same question about the number of children you serve who are being subsidized. Some of the private people closed up because they didn't get those whatever vouchers and whatever the government, the national government, and I guess I say as a former educator, people have to have places for their children to stay. Decent, affordable daycare. And these people are working on minimum wages and trying to provide for their children, so we are blessed to have a very nice place, at least that one up there on Patterson, and is it 7th?
7th Street, yes,
It's
ma'am.
a very beautiful place.
Thank you.
When you pass by, if you see the children out, it's clean looking, it's nice, and that's wonderful.
Ms. Adams?
Yes. Mr. Burton, I think most of us know how difficult it is to run a daycare center, whether the economy is good or bad.
Correct.
I always question people in that business, what type of marketing are you doing? Because you can't open a daycare and think the children will come like the Pied Piper or something. That doesn't happen.
Correct.
You got to have some kind of marketing where you, whether it's, going to the communities, outreach at churches, outreach at other facilities that connect to it. But I guess I just need to know what kind of marketing are you doing, because if your target is 110 and you got 65, you're just a little bit over halfway. So, and how long has the center been open?
It opened in August.
In August, yeah.
And there are several things that we're currently doing in the marketing, and we are stepping up our marketing. One of the things that have been fortunate or maybe unfortunate for us in the past is that we've never had to do a whole lot of marketing. We went off our name brand, and children have always come to us. Opening up the new facility, we had to do some marketing, but I don't think we expensed enough funding for the marketing side of it. We had that conversation today in our board meeting, and we're redirecting some funds to some marketing in some more of the more major magazines and things that are out there. We get a lot of good coverage through some of the local papers and some of the other things that are there, but we just started a campaign where we're sending out to corporations and offering discounts to corporations. We had several meetings with several local corporations to get in front of their employees in the benefits package so that we can offer that out there also. And so I think you will see over the course of the next month or so, perfect example would be Enmar. We just did a presentation to the Enmar group that's just moved over to where we are. We did a presentation to them about 4 months ago prior to them coming, but now we have 3 new Enmar families in this center. And so I think that going out to those particular facilities, we met with Wake Forest Baptist the other day, and so I think we're in line now to start to pick up that enrollment.
Thank you. Any other questions, Ms. Adams?
No, well, for Mr. Brooks.
Okay, well, hang on just.
Yeah.
Let's finish Mr. Burton first. Mr. Burton, hold tight. Ms. Burke had a question.
Yes, I was going to ask you, you brought up Enmar, and I was going to ask you how diverse are the children at Mud Pie?
At our downtown east facility is probably the most diverse population that I have in any of my facilities. At this point, I think every ethnic group is being represented in that facility, at least 1 to 2 students. We had one Hispanic family, but they decided that they wanted to go back to one of my other centers, so they moved to the downtown center. But we're very diverse in that particular center.
The reason I say that, when you talked about the areas around there, the businesses, you have some young folks with children, and it'd be more convenient to bring their children there.
Correct.
And I meant to address you as Dr. Burton. You're trained in this area.
Thank you, but it's not necessary, but I appreciate it.
You better take it while you can get it.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. McIntosh had a question.
So what's your projection as to the time frame you'll need to get up to the 110 to break even?
We think we should be up to the 110 no later than June at the end of this fiscal year for us. We're hoping to get there before then. We just started our summer campaign, and we're working with the arts-based school and several other people to do a summer program at the facility also. So I'm pretty much sure we'll be there by then. The capacity of the building, just so everyone understands, is 244 each shift. So we have first and second shift. Our break-even point is 110. So I'm pretty positive over the course of the next year or so that we will get to the profitable margin and be able to take care of the debts that we have on the facility.
I have just a brief comment, question. I know there's some other folks that had questions for Mr. Brooks. We'll get him back up. But kind of along those same lines, I think you'll find the council very accommodating in the sense that we think, at least for me, this is a very vital service for the community, but I do think it needs to be a one-time event that whatever if you break even, needs to be lowered, it needs to be lowered, adjusted, whatever. But I can certainly understand the startup issues, particularly the 5-star rating or whatever it was type stuff. Anyway, there were some questions for...
One
more question, okay.
Yeah. What, if you can tell us, what was the profit loss?
The profit loss? We're losing about $30,000 a month since January.
Okay.
Okay. All righty. Thank you, sir. Mr. Brooks, you're back up. Any questions for Mr. Brooks? Mr. Mayor has a question.
Thank you. Richie, there wasn't a term sheet in here for us to look at, and I saw in the I guess the way it would be is the city manager would be authorized to negotiate the terms of it, but I assume the way it would work, that there would be a 5-year amortization term with a minimum payment of $40,000 a year, provided, however, that anytime they get a reimbursement from the federal or state, they'd have to make additional payments in that year to us until the loan is satisfied. Is that?
That was our thought.
That sounds good.
Okay, Mr. Montgomery.
And my question is, I'm going back to the money and source of money again. And I have the same question for item G2 in terms of the ability to use CDBG dollars in this area. It's my understanding that you can use CDBG dollars in some sense in terms of offering services to, in terms of child care. To some extent in terms of particularly the children that are being served in that. And so was that even something that was considered as we looked at this process?
Did we consider using community development block grant funds for this? No. And the reason being, we're in the process of doing the con plan, and all of the funds all the CDBG funds we anticipated would be used for other purposes. Particularly, as you know, we just completed an RFP process for nonprofits to submit requests for funding. And as in past years, the requests for that probably exceeded $3 million for about $1 million in available funds. So no, we did not consider CDBG funds for this. And it would probably be a challenge attempting to find CDBG funds for it. It would certainly cause us to have to reduce some other funds, some other anticipated or committed, not committed, but funds we had anticipated using for other sources in order to fund it with CDBG.
Okay.
I need that
Yes, ma'am.
question. The question that the mayor asked about how they would and what the city manager would have to make sure. Where is that? Is it somewhere in this book? Other than this ordinance amendment?
Page 3, Councilman Burke, the resolution, be it further resolved that the city council and the city manager is authorized, by the city council, the city manager is authorized to negotiate and execute contracts.
Yeah, well, I was thinking about the contract. That's actually the contract that says what he just finished saying that you would be doing. Because sometimes we sort of don't put things down, and when we look up, it's not clear. Where is that he was mentioning?
It's not in the book.
I just made that up.
What did you say, Mayor?
I said that was just a suggestion that I'd made.
Yeah, he did.
Recommendations. Okay, well, I thought that was a good recommendation.
I did too.
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
Yes, and we'll do that with a revised resolution, but when we looked at these bridge loans, what we attempted to do was to provide a reasonable term, but in the final analysis, try to make certain that as funds were received by the entity, we would get them back immediately.
Right.
So we didn't have to wait the entire term period.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion for approval or action item on this?
I got one more question.
Okay, go ahead. Excuse me.
And I brought this up before, and I think Councilman Adams mentioned it. Even though all of these agencies we're looking at tonight, I think are great agencies and things and doing work that is pivotal to the community. What I've mentioned in conversations to the city manager, and I'll say here today, is that we, and when I say we, staff as well as council, needs to take a look in terms of some of this process, in terms of other organizations coming in and requesting the same type of assistance, because I think it will not be just of us to turn down other agencies that come with the same parameters that we're funding right now. And the fact is that we're not going to have money to do that for everybody. So how do we pick and choose who and when we do this for? Those type of parameters need to be worked out, because if not, if we get to a place and we just decide, no, well, we funded these other agencies, you have others out there who may be in similar situations. And we need to be clear on how we do this moving forward, because we can't do it for everybody. And so how do we choose what services hit the mark in which we decide to do this type of work for?
That was an issue some years back, because we couldn't do it for all agencies, and it seemed like we were being unfair. And the chairman of the Finance Committee, Ms. Merchel, met and came up with some type of recommendations to us how we would go about doing that. And I think that the chairman of this committee now needs to have some conversation with city manager and whomever, the mayor, to see how we could, because we're going to have to show these agencies we're fair. We also will need to show these agencies we don't have a lot of money either, and that they cannot continue to come back. And then I think once in a conversation we had, Mayor, we were talking about how they're overlapping. And we need to see which agencies are not and how we go about working with each agency. So I believe, Mr. Chairman, that would be one of your responsibilities
I
to
have
bring
a
something
comment on
back.
that in a minute.
All right.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on this item? Do I have a motion?
I have a comment.
Do you have a comment?
I have a comment. Just as Councilmember Montgomery said, and Councilmember Burke, we don't want to seem like the bad guys, but everybody going to say we the bad guys anyway. If it is our responsibility to do due diligence for the citizens of Winston-Salem and the tax money and dollars that we receive, not just from taxes, but from the federal government and the state. Because of the times that we live in, and we see, as staff knows, that we are losing tax dollars or monies that we have taken for granted for years. They're going away as we sit here now, and we definitely need some type of process in place, Mr. Garrity, as to how we do this going forward, because there is going to come a time, like I'd like to see a report, and I don't know how many we've done, how many bridge loans or special compensations we've made since this economy just kind of, and they froze, the government shut down and all of that. I'd like to see that and a breakdown of where the money is coming from out of the funds. But if we don't have a process in place, then we're asking for to be held to scrutiny as to how we're doing this. Is this a warm, fuzzy feeling today for the council or the committee or what? I mean, I just think that we need to do that in order to ensure our citizens' transparency and that we are being fair and just. I'm done, Mr. Clark.
Okay. Does the committee wish to take a position on this item tonight? Then I would suggest we keep it in committee. Let me, if I can comment on Ms. Burke's item, I actually was going to wait for two more items, but we have had, and I'm doing this by memory, I think prior to this month, 2 other organizations that have come to us because of sequestration issues asking for money. We now have an organization here that, for various reasons, has got a budget problem. The next item is a housing authority, which due to a change in, I guess, and you get your 2 minutes in a minute, but where I think they've had to turn over their surplus cash back to the government, so they don't have the cash flow ability. And the last one, folks, is the city of Winston-Salem that was over 100% over budget on the gun buyback. So if we want to see who's, in my opinion, financially irresponsible, we can start with ourselves. Now, you may like the program or not like the program. The point being is we were double the budget. And I do think there is a problem here of everyone thinking that the city's pockets are bottomless, and every organization in town, including ourselves, don't really care what the budget is. I'll just spend what I want to spend, and the city will cover me for it. And I think Mr. Montgomery has a valid point, and Ms. Adams and Ms. Burke have expressed it also. Lee, maybe for the next meeting, let's pull up, and I'm remembering 2 organizations. I may be wrong, may just be one, but...
I think it's more than 2, actually, because one of them was several put together.
Okay, but let's get a whole list. Those have been approved. We'll put these, the Housing Authority and the others on the list. But, you know, to me, you manage your business, and in the very, very unlikely circumstances that it's something that's happened way outside your control, then you need to address it. But the fact that people just getting in line because we're going to approve everything that comes. Anyway, those are the chairman's comments, and we'll start developing a database. Yes, sir.
And I have one last question on this item in particular. In terms of the timeliness of this, I would ask Dr. Burton in terms of a time issue in terms of this, in terms of just what was stated in terms of month to month of loss. If we hold this in committee to next month, how does that affect overall operations at facility?
Mr. Burton, Dr. Burton, you want to comment on that?
I know the short answer to that. It really puts us in a very difficult position because of a number of families that we serve, because of the obligations that we have according to the staff. It puts us in a position that we may not be in operation if we're in another 30 days. And we have a brand new facility there that we are, as a board, are trying to, and again today, look at what we can restructure ourselves, and we're doing those things. But this is definitely something that we need to carry us through for the short term. I think you will. We've been prudent in what we've done in the past. We will be able to pay the loan back. It's something that was not predicted. It's something that I've tried to address as a director there. But another month puts a whole lot of strain on us.
Okay. Thank you.
We have 73 employees.
Yeah, we could send it forward without a recommendation. We'll have some more data by the meeting. How does that sound?
I would rather, if we, instead of holding it, if we didn't make a recommendation, to still move it forward.
Are you going to make a motion to move it forward without recommendation?
I move to move this item forward without recommendation.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise. Thank you. Okay, we'll now go to G2. Mr. Taylor, we're on G2. Thank you.
Consideration of items relating to bridge funding to the Housing Authority of the City of Winston-Salem. Resolution authorizing bridge funding to the Housing Authority of the City of Winston-Salem in the amount of $221,000. And B, ordinance amending the project budget ordinance for the City of Winston-Salem, North Carolina for the fiscal year 2013-2014.
Mr. Brooks, you want to give us a 2-minute on this one?
Yes, again, committee members, this is another bridge loan with the Housing Authority, who operates programs, 6 rental assistance programs. And they serve the special populations, which would be the disabled and homeless households. Their grant agreements have not been executed, and they are in need of funds to continue with the rental assistance programs. In the past, they have funded these this program and there are various starting dates with monies out of their reserves. But from what I understand, their reserves are depleted and they can no longer do that. So they're requesting $221,000 in order to continue funding these rental assistance programs until they can get their sub-grantee agreements executed. And Mr. Woods is here and can respond to any questions.
If Mr. Woods could come up, I saw Larry back there. Come on up. Mr. Woods, if you give your name and address for the record, if you could just kind of comment from your perspective on what's going on here.
Sure. My name is Larry Woods, Chief Executive Officer for the Housing Authority of Winston-Salem. We're located at 500 West 4th Street. This program is a program that we administer on behalf of the City of Winston-Salem. It is part of a continuum of care and tenant rental assistance program. The way the program operates is that we are given a certain number of vouchers that we provide to low-income families, senior citizens, and the disabled, and they can then live in safe, decent, affordable housing. In the past, we've had the ability to have a reserve account from our other programs and been able to provide funding while the city is negotiating with HUD or signing a contract with HUD to have the program continue. Normally, those funds are available sometime in August, but unfortunately, the renewal of these contracts are coming up as early as April 1 of this year. HUD no longer allows us to maintain a reserve account. Our reserve account is capped at 2 weeks, so we have 2 weeks of reserve funding. In the past, we would have normally used our own funding and kept the city's funding of this program moving forward, and when the city is then reimbursed by HUD, they would then reimburse us. We are no longer in that position. Unfortunately, we're asking the city that there needs to be another way in which these families' occupancy will not be disrupted because of a delay in the city receiving of HUD funds. And so I'm here today asking the city to consider alternative funding in terms of a bridge funding, so that when the funds are made available to HUD, HUD then will be refunding the city back their money. This basically is pass-through money. It's not money that goes to the Housing Authority. Only 7% is used for our administrative fees. The bulk of it goes straight to landlords. That covers these tenants' rent, sometimes up to 40, 50, 60% of the rental assistance.
Who in the city negotiates with HUD? Mr. Brooks, is that you?
That's through our office, and we expect to get July. We expect to receive the authorization from HUD, but it will probably take at least 2 or 3 months to get all of the agreements prepared and executed.
I certainly would hope we would express to HUD this is a timing effect. Somebody moves in January, but the HUD contract didn't get done, and you don't get the money till April. And I understand you used to have much more cash in the bank. They pulled it back, I suspect, to balance their budget.
Yes, they did.
Left you with 2 weeks in the bank instead of 4 months or whatever. Mm-hmm. But is this a permanent loan? Mr. Woods, yeah. Larry, come on.
It's actually really not considered, I would call it a loan. HUD is going to reimburse whoever finds these dollars. Mm-hmm. It's just for us, it's just a pass-through. So the idea that it's a loan to the Housing Authority, it's actually assisting these families. The city will be reimbursed, as Mr. Brooks says, soon as all the paperwork is signed and Congress approves it, and then it's completed. Now, and
said that.
Yeah. I'm trying to be as open and as honest as possible.
I wouldn't necessarily recommend that. But go ahead, please.
But that's where we are right now. Yeah. And again, you're looking at close to 130 families that could be affected. Mm-hmm. The bulk will be affected starting April 1st through the April 24th.
And these are different programs that we have to get funded?
Shelter Care Plus, then there's a continuum of care program also. They're all under rental assistance, but they're different pots of money that they come from.
So we will get reimbursed at various times? Okay, and then we'll have to extend the money again next year when we go
Right.
through this. Gotcha. Okay. I got all sorts of questions coming. Ms. Adams, I'll start with you.
Okay, Mr. Woods or Mr. Brooks, on page 8, it says that, Tier 1 projects, they have a higher priority to be funded by HUD. If Shelter Plus Care 3 or any other grant is not renewed by HUD, the city will not be able to recoup the funds from HUD. Also, HAWS has no other funds, we know, to repay the bridge funds. In such a case, the relevant bridge funds will not be repaid. Explain. I think I know, but explain. And Mr. Woods, I understand the predicament you're in. When I was on the Housing Authority, everybody had reserves. And you had like 2 or 3 pots that you could pull this money down to make the operation go. And the feds did just like our state. They just decided to take the money and balance the budget with it. So,
they did.
Yeah, but Mr. Brooks, could you explain that, please?
And that's the paragraph right under the chart,
Right, on page 8,
second half of that paragraph.
where it says the continuing care, shelter plus care projects at the top. Do I need to give him my book?
No, he's
I highlighted mine.
He's got it. He's just reading.
Because when you put in things like not be renewed, not be able to recoup, not be able to use bridge, I'm like, to somebody like reading this, they'll say, oh, you're not going to get any money for the Shelter Plus Care 3. And is it
Yes.
just for the Shelter Care Plus 3?
Unlike the other projects that we discussed, there is a possibility that these renewals could not be, that the program could not be renewed because they are in tiers. Now, what criteria HUD uses to decide which ones they fund, I'm not aware of that. That's something we would have to find out. But there is that possibility that they would not fund all of the grants would not be renewed. And of course, that is also a probability with a lot of the programs that we operate when you have to submit your request for funds each year on these renewal types of grants.
So what you're saying, that Congress can always say no?
They can always say no.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Mr. Montgomery had a question.
2 questions. In terms of, on that same line, I know it's a possibility, but what's the real likelihood of that? Because these programs, these have been consistently things that we've seen go through, and I think I would ask Mr. Woods or Mr. Brooks, whichever one.
I think generally when there's a high probability of them not being renewed, then our HUD rep will usually try to give us a forewarning, and we have not received any warning or any indication that that might occur. So we believe that all of the grants would be renewed, simply because we have not received any other indication from them otherwise.
All right, and then the last question again is back at the money.
Yeah.
The 221 would again come out of housing finance assistance, and what is suggested here is to take that 221, and when that gets reimbursed for that 221, is to set that aside for future years allocations for this type of bridge pass-through that will need to be done with the housing authority.
No, when we receive the funds, it would go back into the Housing Finance Fund for you to then decide how you want to fund projects going forward.
Wasn't there some statement here about the future, this anticipated to be used in future?
Yes, sir. I think it is recommended that this be set up as a revolving
Oh, the
fund.
revolving loan.
Yeah.
Within the housing finance assistance
Yes,
fund,
that
it
would
would be
be
a revolving
Right,
fund.
but we would have that as a allocation.
Those funds would be earmarked for this.
Revolving loan.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Brooks or Mr. Woods? Yeah. And I think it gets back to lead to the comment I made earlier about getting a chart and all this together. You know, I think part of the answer for the council is the stewardship of these loans. And for example, as they're reimbursed, we could report that back. Okay, we've been reimbursed for Shelter Care Plus Level 1 or something, and therefore the balance is this. Understanding that next year when you go in negotiations, you got the same type issue. Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions, comments from anybody? What is the wishes of the committee?
Usually, you know, we're not speechless.
But you are today.
We are today, as Councilmember Clark, because we've seen the requests for money. And we're seeing it now, it seems like every month now coming at us, we're seeing the request. Again, to Councilmember Montgomery and Burke, we don't have a problem giving the money. We just need to know, understand it, and be able to answer to the citizens how we did this. Why, you know, we know why we're doing it, because this affects the continuum of care, homelessness, and all of, and I know we got to decrease, but...
Well, could I recommend we move this forward without recommendation as well?
That was going to be my recommendation, but I was going to also ask in terms of the requests that we've had over these other items in terms of information-wise, how long do we anticipate getting that information? Is that something that would be able to be done by Monday, or is that something that could have been, that we needed that month time frame?
I think most of it we can get by Monday for you.
Okay.
Okay. There's a motion. Is there a second to move this forward without recommendation? There is a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise. And Lee, the other answer to this may be how much, as opposed to, and I'll just take this as an example, do we really need to write a check for $221,000 next week, or can we write a little bit each month until it gets there? Same thing with the Mud Pies folks. Can we write a smaller check now and then another check and another check to see?
Draw down.
Draw it down.
Do drawdowns.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I mean, we've kind of beat this to horse a little bit, but it's like, you know, the federal government is putting the city in the being a bad person, bad cop kind of position there. We got 130 families who are sitting out there beginning April 1 that could be, you know, losing their housing, and it's just
if Ms. Adams going to help move them out.
Yeah, it's going to be. But it's an untenable situation for them, you know. So it's just tough. But I think the council is correct in being very deliberate about this and asking the questions. But there's it's still doesn't feel. But the challenge is there is only so much money in the pot, and while it was on consent that we did not talk about it, we do have a lot less in our fund balances than we had years ago. Ben, you presented that last month, I believe it was, 2 months ago maybe. And at some point, there will not be any money in the pots, and that's what we are concerned about.
Well, I need to make this
Yes, ma'am.
comment. You may not like to hear it, but when I got elected, we had a lot of money, and this city did not really depend on money. They had their own. But as the years have passed, with the government and people doing the economy and the jobs, we just don't have the money. And pretty soon, we're going to be in trouble, Mr. City Manager.
We are going down, yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay, we'll now go to G3, please, if you'll read this.
Information on Community and Business Development Department permits.
Mr. Brooks, you're back up again.
Gotcha.
Let me check. You're on the last one, too? Yep.
We should get overtime today.
Yeah.
What we have here, there are a number of different permits that people can get, and I'm just going to pick a few. If you want to have a push cart, I'm assuming that's food. That's one type of permit. If you want a parade, that's a different type of permit. Or if you want to preach,
That's
that's a different one. Or sound amplification, I guess that's some type of outdoor concert or something. So why don't you kind of comment on
around. All of these different types of permits are now administered by several departments, and we have the departments listed here. So last year, maybe a little over a year ago, there was a committee that was formed to just look at that process to see if it was operating as effectively and efficiently as it could be. And as a result of that meeting, we believe that there were some recommendations that could be made that could make that entire operation a little bit more efficient, customer-friendly, and just easier to navigate. And we have listed the concerns that we identified, where you have multiple departments doing the intake, so you have a citizen that would have to call different departments for a permit. There are different applications for each permit. Some departments are involved in intake, some do all of the processing, and just the information was not consistent. So we looked at that entire process and looked at it from the standpoint, how can we make this more efficient? So for lack of a better word, we looked at putting this in a one-stop shop operation. Whereas a citizen, you would go to one department, and from that one department, you could get everything that you need. So you would do your application, which would be a standard application for all of the permits, and the processing would essentially take place in one department, so that you don't have these different departments that are involved in that. So we combine the permitting process. You have a uniform format. Access to the applications would be on the website, so you can go on the website as a citizen, punch up a permit. You see the list of permits. You can click on it, and it'll take you to that one that you want. It will also take you to the appropriate codes for it, and you get all of that information. So it's online. There's a calendar that would be generated, so if you're looking at a particular date, and this is good for folks who want to do the races and other types of events, you may call today and you want to do this, but somebody else has already booked that, so we would have a calendar that's on the site, so you can go to that calendar and you see what dates are available or what dates have already been committed for that. And lastly is increasing some of the permit fees, because from my understanding, they have not been increased for a long time. We looked at other cities and what their rates were being charged, and believed that there was some room that we could recommend some fee increases on some of these, and that's what we have presented to you.
Okay, we'll start with Ms. Burke.
I was going to say the exception, the one that was staying with the police department. Did you address that?
Yes, there are two that would remain in the city secretary's office.
And
yes, because of police staffing, picket permits, and some other items that will remain with the police department, and permits that are issued by the city secretary office will remain there. All the others would be processed through community development.
Mr. Chairman, we've been trying to make things friendlier for our citizens, and I think this is good.
Well, hang on just a minute. You got community business development currently handles exhibition shows, foot peddler, push carts, and sidewalk cafes. You say what the city secretary's office currently is going to stay as it is?
Yes.
And the police department's going to stay as it is?
Yes.
Just the picket. So the only ones that are moving are parade and block parties?
Block party.
Just two?
Yes.
Okay. Other questions? We'll go around the table. Ms. Montgomery?
But that's kind of where I was going in terms of those. And this is because of personnel that those will remain in those areas? Or what's the reasoning that they will be kept in those areas?
Those departments felt that due to the nature of the processing, that it would be better handled by them if they kept it. So we didn't go into a lot of detail as to why, especially with police. But probably, I would say for police, it's primarily a staffing and resource issue with them. They're better able to, as obviously, predict what they can do and what they can't do.
And the reason I bring that up is because if this is just my eyes glint looking at it, not knowing the process in each one of the offices, but if they're going to keep picketing, then open air meetings in thinking that is in the city secretary office seems to be more closely related to that. Was there any discussion at aligning both of those in police rather than having that there? If they're going to keep picketing, then open air meetings would also be something that they would approve?
That could occur, but quite frankly, the departments that are doing them were not very amenable to taking on any more than what they had already.
Except for community business development.
Way to go, Mr. Brooks.
And I'm just saying, we're looking at efficiencies. I just see that if we're going to be efficient, let's try to be efficient, not necessarily just what they want to do.
Ms. Light, you had a question, comment?
Well, actually, I was going to ask the same questions, that why leave out, okay, I understand the police department needing to handle some of it, but as you said, Derwin, I think parades and fireworks and open air meetings should be with the police department. Sound amplification, well, I don't know whether I think that should be allowed or not, but it seems like there could be some more work done on this, on
the items that would remain with the city secretaries and the police department.
Yeah,
Some more
yeah,
work,
it doesn't.
Whether or not they could be infused also. We can do that. We can.
Yeah, to me, part of the challenge is there is a level of expertise that's required for all these. If someone's going to pick it, they have to understand they can't block the sidewalk, or they can do this or that, or a parade. Is a fun run a parade?
Fun run?
Well, these runs they do.
5K. Yes, yes.
I wouldn't describe them as fun, but I do them, or walk them at least. But I mean, sound amplification, you need to know maybe certain hours of the day you can or cannot have amplified sound, how loud it can be. So it's one thing to move stuff around, but you've also got to move that expertise. And I would think, I kind of like the idea of just moving a few and see how that goes, and then maybe moving a few more. But anyway.
Appreciate that.
Okay. Because, I mean, you're taking on 2 more now. There's 35 block parties last year and 58 parades.
It would be an additional 143 permits.
Yeah, for your area. Yeah.
It's here for just discussion this month. We'll look at
Okay.
those options.
Let's look at them.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
One of the things, even if Mr. Brooks's department is the intake and is routing it, they still have to route many of these things to the police department or whoever for their expert review of what does it mean to close this street or.
Okay, so, go ahead.
And that's why my first question was about personnel, in terms of, does one of these have a larger impact on the personnel in the office? So with those numbers that you all are going to have in community and business, is there somebody, the person who's doing some of this already, does that mean they're just going to have a higher workload, or do you have additional people you're going to have in this, or just higher workload?
It'll be a higher workload, and currently we have 2 people that can take on we have 2, whereas there was a part-time person that was initially doing this. Now we have a person that's doing it along with some other duties, and we have 2 persons that are doing that. So it could end up being the equivalent of 1 person.
Okay.
Okay. Well, this is for FYI, so let's think about it. We'll bring it up next committee meeting. Folks, if I could divert off of our agenda for a second, there was an item added, and we don't have that much time left, and I would rather go ahead and address this next. Ben Rao, our Assistant City Manager, this is the additional, Ben, why don't you go to the microphone and tell us what we got here. This is the additional money for the gun buyback program.
Good evening, Chairman Clark, Mayor Jones, members of the City Council. The city held its first gun buyback event on Saturday at the Winston-Salem Fairgrounds. The event was a success. The city paid out $32,800 for 367 firearms. We only had $15,000 in cash with us at the event, and so part of the amendment that we're presenting this evening is to appropriate some additional funds so that we can pay those vouchers. The citizens who receive vouchers will be able to redeem them from the city's revenue division starting on Wednesday, on March 19th. So the amendment we have before you this evening is to appropriate $12,800 more in funding for this event. We had originally appropriated $20,000, $10,000 from general fund contingency and $10,000 from contributions.
Okay.
This would increase that to a total of a $32,800 budget. There is a second event planned for April 12th, and so we're also proposing to appropriate some more general fund contingency, about $10,000, to have some money on hand for that event.
Okay, so as of right now, we've budgeted 20, and how much did we actually spend Saturday?
$32,800.
So that doesn't leave any for the next event if we just do 32.8.
Right, and Well, see, we already had 20,000 budgeted, so we're increasing that budget by 12,800. That gives us the 32,800 for this event.
Yeah.
And then the amendment's doing an additional $10,000 for the next event. So the amendment...
The total is actually 42.8. That's what we're going to spend.
Right.
That's correct.
That's right.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
All right. The chief's here if anybody got any questions. Chief, you want to come up, or one of you folks and we'll answer any questions folks may have.
I have a question of Ben.
Ben, before you leave, Mr. Montgomery has.
In terms of this additional amount that we approve now, what if we get to the next one and we have the same type of
Situation.
Are we going to stop at this amount and say, okay, yeah, we're out? I think it was great that we had that turnout. I think that you have that many more guns off of that could be put into the wrong hands. I think, as we've already stated, that you have people who good hands who were in are now bringing them in, but they can come out of bad hands. So what does this mean going forward if we get that same type of turnout at the next event? Will we stop? Will we keep going?
Well, my assumption would be that we would issue vouchers at that point, and we'd have to come back to council for another amendment.
Well, if you do the vouchers, we commit it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, any questions for Ben or the chief? Ms. Adams has a question or comment.
Yes. To Councilmember Montgomery's comment about continuing on, I think we had a great turnout. Thanks, Chief. Thanks to your team. But again, my concern is, I know we're talking about crime and safety, and in the other agenda items, we were talking about housing and homeless and children. How do we, like you said, Councilmember Clark, because we paid out this much money and everybody now knows we paid out this much money via the press, what happens if so many people show up from all over the county and the cities, and now we got, instead of 32,000, we might be talking about 50, 60,000. How do we address that? Do we just say that we need to cut it off at a certain point, and let them come back another time? It's a great idea. We're showing it's successful, but we gotta be thinking about what we're doing. We're going into budget season. And again, it's a great idea, great concept, but I think we need to think about this just like we did those other 2 or 3 issues.
Okay.
Yeah.
Chief, I guess pose the question to you. What are your thoughts, comments?
Certainly, we can make the decision to stop it this past Saturday, what we chose to do, because we had so many people there with the weapons on hand. We chose not to let those weapons go back. We made a decision not to let those weapons go back, so we put our heads together and we came up with the voucher system.
In fairness, I made that decision.
Hey.
They consulted with me, and we didn't. That was a recommendation, but I did make that
Let's throw
decision.
him under the bus.
Next time, we're
Yes,
going to let
sir.
you go in your pocket.
But I do think we have the benefit of hindsight, and the question I think for the council members, do we want to allocate a hard amount of money, which I'm kind of hearing
That's what I
what
Yeah.
Ms. Adams is suggesting, which would be my feeling as well, now that we have kind of a feel for it. Anyway,
I think the city manager made the right call to that given day, but maybe I agree with everybody. We need to put a cap on it. We announced it this time. We got $20,000, first come, first served kind of thing, and you managed the expectations, I guess. But Saturday, I think we did the right things.
only thing I would suggest, we may have given too much. Just reading the anecdotal comments in the paper, I think a lot of those folks were going to bring the things if it was $20 or $100. You never know, but anyway, go ahead.
And looking at this amount that we're allocating in addition to that, so we're going to, 12,800 would be what would be on hand for the next one. That would be so $10,000 would be what was on hand. And again, based off of what we just saw, if we want to set a cap, do we want to set it as low as where we are now? Do we want to be in a more medium place at what we anticipate turn out to be? So we're still hitting it on the nose, getting a majority of those weapons, but then we're still not going as high as we did before, so that we're finding some middle ground at place. That would be my suggestion, because I think the 10,000 has shown that that wasn't sufficient at that time. Or do we hold off until next year or another time when we do this all together? If we're going to do it, let's not put us starting off in a bad position.
Jeff, you had a comment?
Yeah, and I was there Saturday morning and was talking to the officers as this was rolling out. And I think everybody got caught by surprise about the turnout. And the conversation was the last time this had been done was around 2000.
94.
So, I mean, this has been a long time since we went through this, and I think just the turnout was much higher than anticipated. And there was a lot of conversation about, what do we do? Do we shut it down? Do we give vouchers or whatever? And I think it was the right decision to do what we did. I think it was a good call. But there was also conversation about the second one of these coming up is going to be in a place that's not going to generate as much turnout. I think the feeling is that the second turnout, by virtue of where it is, by virtue of the fact that a lot of people are going to show up for the first one, it'll be a smaller deal. And then also we kind of talked about fundraising on it, and I think there's an opportunity to maybe do a little bit better job of getting private funds in instead of just relying on city money.
Okay.
There is some conversation in the community about some money being available, so I think we need to work hard to leverage that on top of the city money.
Okay. Yeah, and obviously any private money will be on top of what we do.
That sounds good.
Do we have a motion here?
What kind of motion are you looking for?
I'm looking for
I move approval of,
motion that's in here. Yeah.
It's not a number on it, but of the amendment item that was added to the budget.
Yeah.
Is she going to read it so we can hear?
Yes.
Is this?
We're looking for an additional $12,800 from the general fund.
Yeah, that's the motion. It's 12.8, right?
Plus the second.
22.8, excuse me. There is a motion attached to last, be it ordained, City of Winston-Salem. It's to 22.8 is the additional amount of money. And the motion's the last page of your item.
Yes, so the public can understand the motion needs to be read.
You want me to read the motion?
Just read the be it ordained, that portion.
Okay. Be it ordained that the mayor and city council of the city of Winston-Salem, that the annual appropriation and tax levy ordinance and the project budget ordinance for the fiscal year 2013-2014 be amended to appropriate additional funds for the gun buyback events in March and April.
To the tune of $22,800. Is that the motion you've made? Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Yes, sir.
I can wait to the vote.
Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise. Mr. Taylor, you had a comment.
Yeah, now that this has been voted on and it'll go to the full committee on Monday,
Yeah.
I would just say in public safety we can have another conversation about some innovative ways. I like Councilor McIntosh's idea about bringing some additional funding to the table from private entities. Also, we can look at potentially dialing back the amount of money per gun. That is an option. I'm not saying it's the best option. We want to make sure we don't run out of money, but we don't want to leave guns on the table. If people don't want these guns, we don't want them to fall into the wrong hands. We want to get them off the streets. I think there are other ways to do it. So I'm glad Finance voted on it, and we'll look for ways in public safety to see if we can't dial back a little bit.
Sure.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Yeah, Ms. Carmen.
Are you cutting off the next one at $10,000? Is that good? You run out of money.
I kind of heard, that was not part of the motion, but I kind of heard from the folks up here that that's kind of all the money we got. Okay, but you could certainly raise private money. Okay. Thank you, folks. The last item, and we've got about 5 more minutes, has to do with the changes in the RUCA program. Mr. Brooks. And before we get into here, Mr. Taylor, you're the chairman of Public Safety, which is after this. Let me see how we're doing. We may want, and this is just FYI. Is there a motion tonight? This is just an FYI.
For discussion,
Why
bring
don't
it
you
back.
give us a brief presentation, then we can talk about it and review it, and it will be on the agenda for next month as well.
As requested, staff took a look at the current program guidelines for the RUCA program and attempted to make revisions that would make the program, that would provide more accountability and just tighten up the program more than what it has been in the past. Council Member Adams requested a chart that showed what the original guidelines were, revisions that we were attempting to make, and did make some in the second phase, and current revisions, which we are recommending now, and that's what we provided for you. As indicated on the cover memo, the highlights of the suggested revisions would be the entity cannot be a coordinator and recipient of RUCA funds. Quite frankly, we had a situation where you had a person or the entity that was coordinating, the coordinator who was out doing the marketing and implementing and getting a fee for bringing applications to the table, also being able to apply for the loan. We thought that created somewhat of a kind of difficult type of situation. Financial assistance would be available to the owners of the property only, not the tenants. We believe that way we can be assured of having a way to secure those funds, because currently, as you know, when you're dealing with the tenant, what we've been able to do is either get some type of security on the equipment, which in most cases may not be adequate to cover the loan significantly, or a personal guarantee, which is just as good as the person. You all know that. So we believe that by having the loans with the owner of the facility, that would enable us to have a more secure and lessen our risk. Also, the application process, have a more documented application process, so folks know from the beginning what is involved in this. So it would be very detailed. It will allow them to see what they need to do. It would also give those who have the capacity to go through this alone to do so still with some assistance, those who have experience in doing rehab or development type of work versus those that's a complete novice that don't and that would require assistance. And with our review, we'll be able to identify that also and can provide that assistance up front. We list the types of documents that we will be looking for. We heard you clearly when you talked about a business plan. So we've included a business plan where applicable, because all of these loans may not require a review of a business plan, but where it's applicable, we would want to see a business plan to look at how viable the business is going to be once the loan is made. Also qualifying the owner and the property. Actually going through a process where we're looking at that owner's capacity, looking at their credit, their credit worthiness, everything that really a conventional lender would look at and what we normally look at through our other lending types of programs. Because in the case of default, that's when it becomes very important that you've done that on the front end rather than having to get caught on the back end not having done that. So we list those types of things that we would look at: the stability of the project, verification of scope of work, soundness of the business plan, looking at the contractor, the validity of the contractor. Do they possess the proper license? Looking at prior work they've done and doing some research on them to just flesh them out to see what their track record has been. Loan closing to verify all funds, which would be whether or not there's an owner contribution or other funds that's involved other than city funds, and particularly having these progress payments approved, number one, the work inspected and approved by someone on staff that will be dedicated to look at the RUCA loans and these other business loans, because we operate about 4 or 5 different business loans that require the same type of assistance, so that assistance is needed on those others also. So having site visits, having them documented, and being able to flag problems or potential problems as early as possible. So those are some of the highlights of the changes that we would recommend making, and we know that by having more accountability and tightening up this process, One of the cons would be it will slow down the process a little bit. We don't believe not enough to make a substantial difference, but when our experience is when the applications now are submitted, folks are ready to go and they look for a quick turnaround, and it's not necessarily a week or a month's turnaround on this. It takes time in order to do your proper verifications and just coordinate through the city departments, because one of the issues that we're constantly faced with when you have plans that are submitted, currently when you have plans that are submitted by a business, they may go to the inspections department for review. Inspection signs off on them. The applicant then believes that's an okay for the project, so they go out and start telling the contractor you can go to work, when actually that's not an okay for the project. That's just approving the plans. You still have to come through and complete the application process and have it executed properly. So this process would avoid those types of things from occurring. So that in itself would cause some of the, if you will, extra time to do the processing. More importantly, we believe that currently we just don't have staff, construction staff, to devote to this, which was the problem that we experienced last time, because currently all of our construction staff are paid out of federal funds to monitor, to number one, help property owners prepare residential applications, inspect, do scopes of work, and monitor those types of projects. The time that they can spend on these non-federal projects or other projects that may even be in a targeted area is somewhat limited. So we do believe going forward, if we're going to do this properly and be able to provide adequate construction management and monitoring, that we would need someone dedicated to that, and we would recommend and ask that you consider a position, dedicated position that's non-federally funded, that could provide that construction management and oversight. So those are the highlights.
Mr. Montgomery had a comment, question.
Yeah, I have three, well, actually two. The question in terms of when you mentioned about credit worthiness of the individuals on that process, will it be taken into consideration that some of the areas that these are going to be located in are going to be challenged, and so therefore the owners of those may not have some of the regular standard, meet some of the regular standards that a conventional loan would want you to have on a commercial property, i.e. space leased up and quality of some of those things, so they might not hit those. So this program would still need to be open enough to be able to help those areas.
As we do take that currently under consideration with all of our other loan processing tools. But it would help to identify some issues like bankruptcy and some other serious types of infractions, if you will, that may be present that you don't know about until at the end when you're trying to collect or take some action on the back end, and then you're faced with all of this that had you done your due diligence on the front end, it would have been identified, and possibly some other avenues made to address those types of problems or issues.
Okay, and the last part of that was just requests in terms of, with that position, just trying to understand what other people are currently doing. And I'd like to know how the business development office, more so those with Mr. Millett, Farabee, and Gonzalez, how does those individuals' role play into this program in terms of job description wise? And because I was understanding that some of those individuals had some responsibility in this, and I may be wrong in that, but that's something you can get me later. You don't have to answer now, but just to understand.
I can get you that, but in some respect you're correct, but also that helps with the problem because you have folks that essentially may be a loan processor that on the construction side, they're just not experienced and equipped to do what's needed to monitor on the construction side. So if you're doing a $5,000 project where you're only putting in some windows, doing some painting, I can go out there and look at that. But I'm not comfortable when you start doing your more intense type of building construction where you need someone that's really experienced. And actually with your commercial types of projects, you need someone with a building level 2. A building level 1 can get you by for residential, But on these commercials, you need somebody that's state licensed with a building level 2 to really do an adequate job. And right now, we only have one person that has a building level 2 certification.
Mr. Taylor had a question.
Thank you. I've said time and time again that I believe the RUCA program has been one of the better programs that the city has had in the last few years in terms of development and redevelopment in the urban communities. I have one question. On the first bullet point, it says an entity cannot be the coordinator and a recipient of RUCA funding. Mr. Brooks, what I want to know is, does that apply, for example, to a larger mini mall who has a tenant in the form of a restaurant, for example? Could the restaurant then apply for RUCA funds if the larger mini mall had already come and made an application for RUCA funds as well?
I don't know that I understand the question, but let me tell you what we were trying to get at.
I can be more specific if necessary, but I'll be patient.
You have a situation where you have a person that is the coordinator, and the coordinator is responsible, number one, for going out marketing the program, assisting with the application, and as it currently is, overseeing the project. But number one, how many coordinators may have the capacity to actually oversee the project? Very few. Then they're paid a 3%. They are eligible to receive a 3%. So you could have an owner who's monitoring their own project that we're paying 3% to do that when they're getting the loan. They're the recipient of the loan. Just doesn't flesh out.
You've answered my question.
Okay.
Thank you.
So the way we addressed that the last time, which was not in program guidelines, and the person or the entity was willing to do that, the 3% that they received, they put back into the construction. So they didn't walk away with it as a profit for themselves.
Okay.
We were able to negotiate where that money went back into the project. You may not be able to do that on all, so that's why we're recommending this.
Okay.
Thank you.
Folks, we're 10 minutes over. That's for information only. Let's keep that in committee and kick that around a little bit. We'll talk about it next. Mr. Taylor, y'all want to convene at 6:15, something like
Public
that?
safety will meet at 6:15.
6:15, finance is adjourned.